Today we're making meatloaf, sharing a few tricks to keep it extra tender and juicy so you can make it your own. We start with my favorite, the soup jelly, a technique often utilized in Shanghai soup dumplings, terrines and pâtés. All you need is an extremely gelatinous stock. Today we do it from scratch with chicken wings and some aromatic vegetables. You can easily use store-bought with gelatin powder. We bring this to a boil, let it simmer for at least 4 hours to really break down the collagen. We then strain and reduce into the fridge overnight. Now we have our jelly. We simply dice them. You want to reserve about 15 to 20% of the meat's weight. Perfect. Back into the fridge and we prepare our aromatics. Here we have some chicken fat I skimmed, but you can use any neutral oil. If you're aiming for an old school rustic texture, you would keep your aromatics raw. But today, because we're using a soup jelly, we want better moisture control. So we gently cook them to evaporate their water content. And we have the added benefit of concentrating their flavor, the sweetness of the onion in particular. Once the onion's translucent, optional. Crush some garlic for some savory depth, and later caramelize sweetness. The recipe is just a guideline. You can use any aromatics you fancy and make it your own. Once the whole room smells like garlic, we add our umami bomb, tomato puree, and this will also bring beautiful color. Once there's not much steam coming out and you start to hear a sizzle, meaning most of the water content has been evaporated, stove off, and we let this cool completely while we prepare our panade, the binding and tenderizing agent usually made of breadcrumbs and milk. Today we go a bit further by adding a bit of baking powder. In actual bread making, yeast is used to make it light and airy, but yeast and raw meat gets a bit tricky. Purely texture-wise, baking powder does a similar job by introducing air pockets when heated, making your meatloaf light and airy. We soak them with milk for about 10 minutes for them to fully hydrate. Now we build our loaf. We have our fully rehydrated starch, cooled aromatics, crack 2 eggs. The yolks would give it the tender texture, richness and color, and the whites would bring it structure. Generous amount of Worcester sauce for some umami and tang. Dijon mustard to reinforce the tang and bring some subtle heat. Chopped parsley for some brightness and color, and they will also contribute towards density control. Generous amount of salt, about 0.6 to 1% of the total weight of your mince. Black pepper to taste. And we mix. And we're doing it in this order because once we introduce the meat, we want to be gentle to not overwork the protein, making it tough and chewy. Now the meat. We have 50-50 pork and beef mince. If you want to go the extra mile, use pork shoulder and beef chuck. And if you have access to veal, that would make it even more gelatinous. We simply lift and fold. For moisture and flavor, you want your mince to be around 20% fat. Now the soup jelly comes back, and we fold them in. Once everything looks homogeneous, we cover with cling film and leave it to rest in the fridge for at least 15 minutes, but ideally half an hour, for everything to slightly firm up for shaping. Now we shape our loaf. And you shape it however you like. The only thing to bear in mind is that it heats from outside in, so you want the shape to be relatively even. Now, this goes into a 190 oven, no fan, for gentle, even heating. For about 45 minutes to an hour, you want the core temperature to be around 70 degrees Celsius because we have pork. After a 15-minute rest, we have this beauty. It's so gelatinous that the meat juices are barely moving. Just for demonstration, beautiful crust on the outside, extremely moist on the inside. And we have the air pockets we talked about, created by the baking powder. I'm not saying you should make a meatloaf like this every time, but merely showing you the small tricks you could apply to your own recipe. This is my meatloaf.